Hey everybody, Rob here. It's time for a couple of brand new pro revenge stories. First one, the day I won the lottery. Let's jump right in. 57% of you watching this video right now aren't actually subscribed to the channel. What are you waiting for? Come on, hit that subscribe button. Hit it, hit it, hit it, hit it. My wife and I like to play harmless pranks on each other, things like swapping all the photos in photo frames, or playing around with clocks, etc, etc. All mild stuff. Once, I convinced her she had won the lottery with the old record last week's lottery and play it back having bought the winning ticket prank. After the initial excitement, and before she tried to contact anyone, I revealed the prank and she didn't take it well. In fact, she got quite upset. It took a few hours before we both could have a good laugh about it, or so I thought. Anyway, a few years later, I was serving at sea as an officer aboard a warship. We were deployed and had been for several months at this point. The routine was fairly dull, but the ship's company were keeping themselves entertained for the most part. The ship's chaplain, also known as the Bish, had commandeered the internal radio broadcast system and set up a schedule where members of the ship's company could DJ for a bit or have a discussion, host quizzes, etc, etc. The Bish's favorite bit was his Messages from Home segment, where he would read messages sent to the ship from families back home. As you can imagine, the majority would be insipid stuff like, "Hey Smithy, me and the kids miss you so much. Can't wait for you to get home, XXXXX. Families would email the message, and the Bish would read it out exactly as written. Anyway, on this fateful day, I was on watch in the ops room. For those who don't know, the operations room, CIC in US parlance, is quiet and busy and everyone is focused, especially in an operational environment, which is what we were in. After being in there for a few hours, I needed a leg stretch and a drink, so I let the team know that I was popping out for 2 minutes and headed into the wardroom to grab a cold can of Diet Coke and come straight back. As I opened the door and stepped in, a massive cheer erupted. There were about 10 other officers in the wardroom, all cheering and looking at me. What's going on, guys? Didn't you hear the Bish on the ship's radio? No, I was in the ops room on watch, like you lot should be. Go see him now, now! What? Why? You have an important message, you're gonna want to hear it. So I left the wardroom, aware that around half a dozen of the other officers were following me, and made my way to the compartment the Bish did his broadcast in. As I walked through the ship, one sailor yelled out, "Nice one, sir!" and another, "How much? How much?" I was very confused. I stepped into the compartment and the Bish was mid-flow reading someone's message. As soon as he finished, he looked at me, a huge smile breaking across his face. Here he is, the man of the moment. "What have you got to say, OP?" "About what, Bish? I have no idea what's going on." "So you didn't hear your message? Shall I read it again, listeners?" I realized that he was still broadcasting through the ship. A muffled "yeah" could be heard. He did a little fake cough and proceeded to read the message. "Dear OP, I'll get straight to the point. We have won a life-changing amount of money on the lottery. Please call me as soon as possible. Lots of love, Snugglepuss, the Sausage Monkeys, Blockhead, and Pest Cat." I was utterly confused. The message would have been sent to the Bish around a week ago, and my wife had made no mention of it in the daily email or phone calls I'd had with her. It was also odd that she'd signed off using our silly little family nicknames. Snugglepuss is wife, Sausage Monkeys equals kids, Blockhead is the dog, Pest Cat equals, well, the cat. This was not normal for her on any level. Something was off. The excitement in the compartment was electric. Everyone was slapping me on the back and shaking my hand. I managed to leave, saying something like, "There's a phone call I need to make," and retreated to my cabin. On the way there, I bumped into the XO, second in command, who enthusiastically shook my hand. "How much? How much? You lucky, lucky bastard!" "I don't know, I haven't talked to her yet." "Call her, I need to know if we have to put special measures in place. A little worried about what that would mean. Turns out the Navy has procedures for sailors who come into a lot of money unexpectedly in order to protect them. Who knew? I dashed away. Okay, I'll let you know. Finally, in my cabin, I checked my watch for the time back home and called my wife. Hello? Hey you, apparently we've won a life-changing amount of money. A muffled giggle. It's a prank, isn't it? Yes, we won 10 pounds. Got you. Not really. I knew the message was odd as soon as I heard it. More laughter. OP, you don't understand. The prank is just beginning. You'll see. And in that moment, I understood the genius of what my wife had done. I was due to stay on board this ship for another 2 months. She had just told the entire ship's company that I was a lottery winner. Everyone knew that I'd won a life-changing amount of money. It started reasonably enough. Pretty much everyone wanted to congratulate me, shake my hand, and talk about what I was going to do with the money. I would try denying that I'd won anything, and then I'd get a, "Of course you haven't," wink wink, or in at least one case, getting outright hostile with me for trying to lie. After a couple of days of congratulations came the beggars, from slips of paper under my cabin door to people on board I barely knew taking me to one side, telling me their life story and asking to either borrow or have money from me. Any attempts to convince them I hadn't won a lot of money were met with either, "I understand, I wouldn't hand out money either," or were just plain nasty. As much as I tried to tell everyone I hadn't won the lottery, it took a lot to convince some people. Even 2 months later, in my last week on board, I was still being asked by some what I was going to do with the money and whether it was enough to leave the Navy and retire. Even now, years later, I received the odd text from someone who heard about my win asking for money. OP, your wife is a masterful genius, and I definitely have to say that she won. Good luck topping that one. On to our next story. Publicly humiliate me? Hope your wife doesn't take too much in the divorce. Let's jump right in. When I was in 10th grade, I had 2 teachers that were married to each other. I'll call them Mr. and Mrs. Clark. I had Mrs. Clark as a core class teacher, and her husband was our health teacher. Everyone hated Mr. Clark. He was extremely racist and was very paranoid. He once told us that single mothers are inevitably going to raise children that will never get anywhere in life because a woman cannot raise a successful child on her own. He also scarred the entire class when we had to go over sex and the diseases there are. It's well known that STDs are no joke, but he was acting like we were all going to end up with them the second we sinned. He also was only nice to the athletic. There was a ton more, but for the sake of the post, I'll leave it out. I had his class first period and his wife's class second period, so my day would start off horribly, but then would get better as the day went on. To give you all an idea of the type of student I was on the honor roll and never missed assignments. I was a favorite of Mrs. Clark's, and she often called me and a few other students her angels. The incident: my dad had passed away a year before, and I had just lost a father figure that actually raised me my 10th grade year. I developed a panic disorder and extreme sleep insomnia. I was dealing with 2 catastrophic losses in my life and was struggling hard. I came into class completely exhausted and just hung under the radar. Lucky me, I got singled out by the teacher. My dad had passed due to an OD, and apparently Mr. Clark caught wind of it. He asked me quite loudly what I was on and threatened to report me to the school's officer, saying that normal teens don't act like that and I must be on something. Typically, I would have cried at the idea of confrontation, but I snapped at him before I could process the situation. I had been dealing with these sorts of accusations for a year now and hadn't gotten enough sleep to care about making him mad. I stood up and told him, "You find out my dad OD'd and that I just lost my grandparent that raised me, and you have the fucking balls to accuse me of being on something?" I'm fucking sad and tired. He got red in the face and told me to go to the office. I said, with fucking pleasure. I slammed the door behind me and was on my merry way. When I got to the office, I was seething and shaking with a mixture of rage and anxiety. I got pulled into a room with the vice principal and the resources officer. They had only heard a little bit of the situation, so they asked me to fill them in. After I got done telling them, they were visibly bothered. The school knew of my situation and told me they know life is really hard right now, but I can't cuss out teachers, and they let me go back to class. By this time, it was second period, and oh boy, I was bombarded with questions. Apparently, a friend of mine in the class caught the interaction on Snapchat, and there were a lot of people from my previous class in this one. Would you guess who had the most questions? Mrs. Clark was absolutely livid and actually left the class to go out in the hall. I don't know if it was to cool down or text, but she was out there for about 10 minutes. The revenge. After that, everyone started telling Mrs. Clark about the horrible things her husband was saying and doing. Apparently, this was all news to her. I don't know what kind of man she thought he was, but to say she was surprised is an understatement. Also, this all happened at the beginning of the year. I don't really know how the situation went down, but I am assuming that he was made to apologize because he came up to me and wanted to talk things out one-on-one. We eventually came to an understanding and he didn't blame me for blowing up. Seeing that he was a health teacher, I only had him for about another month after that, but Mrs. Clark was told about everything that he said, even late into the year. Now, one thing that Mr. Clark was completely against was divorce. They were Catholic, and from what I know about the religion, divorce is extremely looked down upon. Yet another thing he despised was children of divorced parents. He said they were doomed in life, and like I shared before, he believed a mother was not fit to raise a child on her own. By the way, they have a child. Their daughter had a lot of limitations. She wasn't allowed to have fast food, and she wasn't allowed to watch anything except PBS Kids because everything else was too satanic and mindless to Mr. Clark. Like I said, he was paranoid. Well, after hearing about how horrible her husband was, and all of the awful things he was saying to students, and also how he was treating female students, he saw women as lower than men, she decided that she had enough. This saint of a woman took her child and moved out of the city to another school come my junior year. Mr. Clark started talking about how he was going to go and get his wife and child back to anyone who would listen. He started ranting to this new class about how the previous class had made up a bunch of lies and rumors that had destroyed his marriage. He said she thought he was some sort of monster, although she has seen video proof of some of the things that he was saying because kids would record some of his class and show it to the guidance counselors to get them to try and do something about it. Out of nowhere, he disappeared. Our other teachers were notorious gossipers though, and we found out through them that he had followed her to the new school that she had taken a job in. I never got to hear about how the situation escalated though. I'm still friends with her on Facebook, and to this day, they still haven't gotten back together. Her and her daughter are doing well though. It sounds like OP's had a very tough time growing up. I mean, I can't even imagine what it's like to lose a parent to an OD. I really don't blame him for taking it out on that shitbag of a teacher though. It was only a matter of time before one of the kids let that teacher have it. I'd like to thank both OPs for posting their stories to the Pro Revenge subreddit. You can visit them at the links in the description below. Please go there and give them an upvote. Once again, this is Rob from Karma Comment Chameleon saying thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share it with your friends. And we'll see you in the next one.